And I have been with the Washtenaw Club, CPUSA, for almost 2 years now, and I am the educational secretary at the moment.
All right. Hi, I'm Forrest. He, him pronouns from the Washtenaw CPUSA club as well. Um, yeah.
Go ahead, Pete.
All right, P is muted. One. All right, we'll circle back. I'm Comrade Luke, he, they, also with the Washtenaw Club.
Okay. Hi, I'm Kalen Watson. I've been with the party for about a year now. As of late, I've mostly been working closely with Shiva on various podcasts and projects. So, I go by he, they, and that's me.
Hello, I am Shiva. I come from the Washtenaw Club from CPUSA. I'm in charge of the media in both the club and district. And yeah, let's have a great time. Pete, did you want to go?
And just a brief introduction.
Oh, I'm still muted. Oh, I'm back. Sorry, my parents came over and dropped off something for me. I'm Pete, pronouns he, they. I'm loosely affiliated with the Greater Lansing DSA at this point, but yeah, that's pretty much it.
Cool.
All right. Yeah, thank you all for the introductions. And this podcast is going to be a pretty open-ended discussion, like roundtable discussion on religion in general, and how does religion relate to the communist movement? How does it impact the working class? How did it impact us personally? And among other questions. So we're going to start this off by just going through the circle and providing each person a platform to just kind of give maybe their personal histories with religion, some anecdotes, things like that, just to get us started. So yeah, Brendan, if you'd like to lead that off.
Yeah, sure. I guess I'll start with stating that I'm not religious. Currently, I'm not involved in any organized religion of any kind. I don't necessarily consider myself a hardline atheist, um, and I do have some side interest in, monotheism and spiritualism and Buddhism, but beyond superficial interest, I don't have any concrete belief system or religious views beyond living functionally as an atheist. And I guess my background is kind of all over the place. But to start, I grew up and was raised in a Catholic household. Um, Very nominally, my parents weren't really practicing, but my extended family is extremely Catholic, very Irish Catholic. Um, and still are to this day. And so, because of that familial background, my parents sent me to Catholic school, and I was there from kindergarten all the way up through sixth grade. And then I ended up moving and ended up in public school. And so basically, after that time, because my parents weren't Catholic and I didn't really see my extended family, I just kind of dropped Catholicism and moved into this more general you know, Christianity, without any labels on it. And I remember um, after that time, after leaving Catholicism, um, my dad he had gotten divorced from my mom. And so, he ended up, meeting another woman and um, who was pretty intensely evangelical Christian. And so he converted and ended up becoming extremely intensely religious um, within the evangelical streak of Christianity, and ended up pushing it very heavily on me and my family for a number of years. And that just caused a lot of um, divide between us, I think, emotionally. Um, just because of the intensity of the religiosity that was um, imposed upon me. Um, but I took to it for a number of years, and I just remember, you know, the middle of my sophomore year, I had a lot of doubts about my Christian upbringing and God in general, and ended up getting pretty into the whole it's pretty embarrassing thinking about it in retrospect, but getting into the very, sort of libertarian atheist YouTube sphere.
The new
Um,
atheism thing. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. I got very into like, Richard Dawkins and Christopher Hitchens
Mhm.
and all of the like Christian versus atheist debate,
Mhm.
sort YouTube sphere. Very, very cringeworthy in retrospect. Um, but that was the beginning of my journey toward questioning, the things that I had been taught, um, early on. And I think that was a hard time for me because I also um, was pretty open early on about my atheism to my family. And my dad especially was very hurt by it, and punished me essentially for it. So I have just I don't know if I can call it religious trauma in the same way that somebody who's been through like a cult experience or a even more intense religious upbringing could attest to. But I do think there is some religious born trauma out of that whole emotional dynamic. But nowadays, I just feel very laissez-faire about it. Very open. Um, and I still, in some messed up way, have some emotional connection to Catholicism, and I kind of miss the community. So I
Yeah.
have like messed up nostalgia for it, even though I hate the institution of the Catholic Church. I still have that just nostalgic memories for when I was an altar boy or a choir boy. It's just the
Mhm.
community really that I miss, not so much the religion. Um, but yeah, that's my story.
Great. That was very good. I think we'll just jump into the next person. So Forrest, do you want to go, kind of give the introduction?
Yeah, I guess personally, I was never like a super religious person. Like my family never went to church or anything like that. I mean, my mom used to go to church with her family, but I was never raised like going to church or anything like that. But I still kind of like vaguely identified for a number of years up until like maybe like seventh grade with like Christianity. Just generally, not like any particular sect or anything like that. Just as a little like uh, personal history context. So my mom her parents were very physically and mentally abusive. My grandma would frequently yell at her for kids, saying like, "I hate you. I wish you'd never been born. That you just go to hell." She would throw things at them. Like one time, she hit my aunt in the back of the head with a bathroom scale and gave her a concussion, and she had to go get stitches on her scalp. There was all this like horrible abuse going on at home, and my mom and her siblings went to their church for help. Went to the local pastor and explained everything, like, hey, our parents are really abusive, and like this is what we're going through. And the pastor responded by blaming the kids, saying like, oh well, you probably deserved it, and like your parents are in the right and all that. My mom has had like a pretty traumatic experience with organized religion. Um, for a number of years in my childhood, she like didn't really seem to have like an antagonistic relationship with Christianity or religion, and often like spoke, I would say, somewhat positively about like uh, Christianity and like the ideas of like heaven and stuff like that. Um, but in recent years, she's uh, really become like an anti-theist in a lot of ways, and uh, like often mocks like contradictions in the Bible and stuff like that. Um, I myself had my own sort of like anti-theist phase in like high school, I would say. Just kind of generally viewing religion as sort of like a backwards thinking. Um, though, different from Brendan's experience, I was never really like in any sort of like online community about anti-theism. It was just kind of like personal reflection and sort of like interaction with uh, friends in high school and stuff like that. So I did end up outgrowing that, and I'm just sort of like a generic atheist at this point. I did have a number of experiences with the church, though, mainly through like family who went to church or friends when I would like stay the night at their house on the weekend, and then like, oh, it's Sunday morning, so now we have to go to church, right? And the when I went with my cousin, for example, for vacation Bible school, it was I would say a very like positive, like fun experience, just sort of like hanging out with different people generally my age, just sort of doing like different social activities. Like, sure, there was definitely like a religious component to it, but it was like a lot of like sort of like fun activities, and like every year they would have like a different theme, like space and stuff like that. And there was always like this sort of prize like incentive structure for participating in activities, where like there was like a market with like goods and stuff like that, like earbuds and things like that, where if you did well with different activities, you would be rewarded with coins that you could exchange for different commodities on the market and stuff like that. So in a lot of interesting ways, it was sort of like the church was like reinforcing like capitalist relations in that sense, and market relations, interestingly. But I felt like my experience there was like positive, because it was there was a lot less like religiosity involved, and a lot more just like having fun, like community interaction and stuff like that. But when I would go to church, like with my friends after like a sleepover or something like that, just going to like regular like church services, like I always like felt really alienated because like they would often like uh, sing songs together and stuff like that. And obviously, like as someone who never went to church, like I didn't know any of the songs or anything like that. So I would always just kind of like sit quietly to myself and just it was just kind of awkward and stuff like that. And then also too, like when the pastor would like give their sermons and stuff like that, they would talk about how like you can't question God, like, and if you question God, you're gonna go to hell or whatnot. And it was a very like alienating experience. Like I don't see how that could in any way be good for like recruiting new members to the church and whatnot. Uh, but yeah, it really felt like in a lot of ways like a personal attack. And I so yeah, I just had like a bad experience with that, and that sort of like kept me away um, from the church and stuff like that. But yeah, I guess I'll just leave it there for my own personal anecdotes.
Thank you, Forrest. That was really good. Next, I think we can jump over to Pete.
All right. I guess we'll just say right now that me and Luke are brothers. So I don't know if Luke plans on giving his own anecdotes, but there's going to be some similarities
Yeah,
there,
there'll be some shared
obviously.
history.
But like we were raised very. Yeah, definitely. But we were raised very religious family. Our family's very like evangelical, like non-denominational, but not even necessarily like really fundamentalist. I guess in some ways they were. They were more so in the past too. There was fundamentalist now, but just very devout. Like took it very very seriously. And like our grandpa was a preacher. Um, and everything. So yeah, raised very religiously, and a couple just anecdotes to show like when I was younger how seriously I took this, like how devout I was. Um, I used to go. Well, yeah, Luke went there a couple times, but I used to go to a youth group at a different church from the one we attended. But it was Trinity Church in Lansing, which is like it's basically a mega church. Like they're where they would have the services. The like the capacity in that room was like well over 500. Like it was a huge room that they would give the services, and they had like two services every Sunday. Like they would fill them both up. So it was that wasn't the church that we went to, but that's the one that I went to the youth group for because it was so big. And my friend went there at the time, and there was one night at this youth group where the youth pastors or whatever came and told all of us that the Michigan legislature had just passed a bill banning, I can't remember how exactly they phrased it, like banning worship or banning religion. Basically, that's what they were saying is that they like banned religion. And so we had to like do it in secret. And so then they had us like, they were like, yeah, we can't be in this building anymore. Like they literally told us the cops are on their way to this building right now. We have to like run back in the woods and worship back there. And then they revealed like, oh, that like that's not real. But like they're like, but it could be like we're persecuted. It was all a big part of like that persecution, like victim complex thing. And I bought it hook, line, and sinker. Like at that point in my life, I really did think that was a reasonable thing that could actually happen. And then about that same time in school, I was like a freshman in high school. A bunch of the nerdy kids, and they asked me point blank. They were like, "Do you believe in evolution?" And I told them no. I like didn't believe in it when I was a freshman in high school. So like to a certain extent, we were like fundamentalists in that respect. And I'm sure like our parents and our grandparents especially too were like homophobic to a certain extent, but like that wasn't really pushed down our throats that much, and like the abortion wasn't really pushed down our throats. It was more just like this, like the world is like bad and evil, and you should avoid it, and like we should just be in our own little community. And so like the internet and like getting into other things was a big like eye opener, just like seeing the rest of the world. And very similarly, I got into that like new atheism, like YouTube kind of thing, the like Four Horsemen and all that stuff. And a lot of that definitely is cringe in retrospect, definitely. But then, so like I put that as like a very important piece of my like political radicalization as well, because after I like deconstructed all of that and I was left with like nothing, I basically like rebuilt my whole ideology and everything from scratch. And then like 6 or 7 years later, I was like a full blown like self-described communist. Then it took me a while to like get to that point, obviously, but like I like getting rid of the religion and like learning why and like why it was wrong, and learning like logic and science and stuff, like gave me those kind of like intellectual tools to like challenge my own beliefs and learn how like why, if whatever proposition, if it's like rational, how to actually figure that out. And like through that whole a process of applying that to all these different things is how I eventually ended up being a communist. So I put that as like very important thing. And that was the other thing I was going to mention. A big part of me like getting doubts or like challenging it in the first place was the like homophobia that's like latent in the church, and the general just like I don't know how to describe it, like ostracization almost, or like the denial that like humans are sexual beings in the first place. Because like I was taught that like masturbation was very wrong, very simple thing to do, and like I'm a 14-year-old kid in high school. Of course, I masturbated. Not to get extremely graphic with it, but like I would feel so much guilt over that. I would be in the pews on Sunday, and I would be sweating and like hot, like my face would be red because I would be so guilty over what I had done. And it finally clicked. I'm like, I'm not doing anything wrong. Like morality is if somebody is injured. Who was injured by me doing this? Like what was actually wrong? Like what was the bad thing that happened because of that? And I'm like, why is it that this God is like against this? And then I'm also bisexual, so having like attraction to men and like being said that was wrong, and I'm like, why though, why? So that was like a big impetus for me challenging all of that. For probably a couple months, I was like a completely non-denominational, like spiritual Christian, where I'm like, yeah, like Jesus Christ existed, did sacrifice himself, like the God of the Bible is real, but the Bible is like a perverted or like a corrupted expression of his message. It was like through the hands of man. I like went down that path, and then for maybe about 2 weeks, I was like, I was getting really into Buddhism at the time too. So for like about 2 weeks, literally like 2 weeks, I called myself a like Buddhist Christian, and then I called myself a pantheist for like about another week, and then I was like, and then it like escalated and escalated until there was literally like one day where I was just like, yeah, no, this is none of it's true. Like all like what is in the reality of like what we're looking at here is like the real world exists. I'm a part of that real world, and that's it. I'm like, there's no like if you can't give me evidence of something like like that's a part of that world, if there's no evidence for it, I have no reason to believe in it. And so like I jettisoned all those kinds of beliefs, kept very in the closet about it for multiple years after that. It wasn't until I was out of high school. I was like 2 years out of high school before I like finally told my parents that I like didn't I wasn't a Christian anymore. Which it was like kind of intense then, but we really haven't discussed it since then, which is kind of strange. But yeah, so I went like the hardline atheist route, and like I describe myself as an atheist because to me it's like a binary. It's like the question is, do you believe in God? If you answer yes, then you're a theist of any such stripe. And if you answer no, then you're an atheist. And I don't, so that's why I describe myself as that. And like that question is like not super interesting to me. The more interesting question is the anti-theist. And like, are you against religion like as a social institution? Which I would also describe myself as an anti-theist as well. But yeah, so I kind of went that like hardcore anti-theist, atheist route for a couple years. and then got more open-minded and accepting to stuff. I still didn't like believe in anything spiritual, but I was more accepting of it, of like my friends believing in it and that kind of stuff. And then actually, what's interesting, which I haven't met a lot of communists who are the same way, like a couple, but not a lot. When I became a communist, the more I studied, and it's been about 4 years now, maybe at the most, that I've like self-described myself as a communist. That like caused me to go back into that like more hardline, like religion is reactionary, like at its core. And at this point, I'm pretty unconvinced that it can ever be a part of like a progressive, like socialist or communist society. I'm way more sympathetic to using it and not being super anti-theistic while we're making the revolution and before we've like achieved socialism. And I have very strong critiques of the way that like the Soviet Union and other countries have dealt with religion in the past. But at like the end of the day, I think society would be better off if it didn't exist at all. Like at the end of the day, I think its primary function is to support class society. That's like the basic purpose of religion. So that would be an interesting thing to get y'all's thoughts on it too. But I'll leave it there for now.
Awesome, thank you. And I'll go next. And like we mentioned, we are going to have some shared history, particularly with our upbringing. So, yeah, I probably won't go into those details since you sort of covered that. But here's Cameo.
Mid podcast.
Anyway, get your butt out of here. But yeah, I guess what I kind of was wanting to talk about was like the development of my crisis of faith, which is similar to Pete's, but has its own character. Because like when I was younger, maybe in like late middle school, early high school, that was when I was really having my crisis of faith, just like questioning what is this. Why do I have these beliefs? All those sorts of things. But this is after I really was having, personal struggles, and I was trying to find solutions to those personal struggles. Like, well, I'm suffering in my real life, and what were the tools that I was given? Like the emotional regulation tools I was given and taught were exclusively through the religious context and church and like a conversation with God. So I fully entered those methods and to solve my problems, praying and like attempting communion with God in the inner mind, and I was fully committed to that. But I didn't see results because you can't just pray and have things happen. It doesn't work that way. And so I was getting increasingly frustrated, just like, well, this is what I was told would work, but isn't working. And so something is going on there where, okay, I lost my train of thought, but yeah, like I was getting increasingly frustrated with the lack of like tangible material results. I didn't have that frame of understanding at the time, but in hindsight, that's kind of what my frustration was. Like, well, I have a real issue, but my method to solving this issue, when I was taught, is not working. And so initially, I actually went further into that hole of like idealistic solutions, and I went into some weird spaces of like, like the craziest shit I loved when I was younger was like Illuminati videos and like that sort of like insane fundamentalist conspiracy stuff. Because it's like, oh, well, I have all these problems with myself in the real world, and like I'm increasingly frustrated at the world failing over and over. And that sort of content provides a scapegoat of like, it's this secret secular, well, not even secular, often they would accuse Jewish people in like this anti-Semitic rhetoric that these people are controlling the world, they're controlling the media, they're controlling the government. yada yada yada. And I was enraptured by it because it's truly fascinating. But I believed it, but also didn't, because I was like, well, this is the only this is like the true answer. Like, I just have no power over anything, and that the world is just controlled by this evil cabal. But once I started really developing as a scientist, and I went on to become a physicist by education, that was when I really was exposed to like the materialist way of thinking about the world, the tangible realities that we can mathematically model and observe, and that got me out of that conspiracy stuff pretty quickly. And just in college, that was when I really started to challenge my lack of any sort of ideology, because I wasn't religious at that point. At that point, I already kind of moved on from calling myself a Christian or like identifying in that way. But also, I wasn't necessarily calling myself a materialist or calling myself a communist. I was just like, oh well, I don't bother with that. I was almost apolitical. I basically identified as a social democrat. But I still held the idea of like, well, God just abandoned me personally. Maybe he's still real. Maybe he's out there, whatever. And some people connect with it. It's like kind of an agnostic view that I had. But really diving deep into the material understanding of the world, like the deep physics, learning about quantum mechanics and black holes and relativity and all this crazy shit that is provable and mathematically sound. That was what really opened my eyes to like, well, no, there is a way to explain all the phenomena we see around us, and that is through the materialist view. So that's, I guess, a brief history. Yeah, I think we can move on now because I don't have too much else to say. Kaylin or Shiva, do you want to?
Oh wait,
Pick it
real
up.
quick, Luke.
Yeah.
Could I comment on like my experience, like watching you and your experience?
Oh, of course, that'd be
Because like
amazing.
I saw that and that was like super interesting. And I will tell you, there was a short period of time, like right when I was first getting like well and truly radicalized, because I was like a Bernie bro dumb sock, like verging on like socialist, but like really crossing the line is when you become like
Yeah.
revolutionary. It's really like when you cross that line. But I was in that space for like 4 or 5 years, like out of high school, and like so I was like pretty radicalized, but not like fully radicalized. And even then, there was like a couple month period. It was like that short, but I was like worried about you, and I like talked to my girlfriend at the time, and I was like, yeah, I try and like get some good ideas in Luke's head, because I'm like, I know he watches some weird shit, and also like in high school, like even when you were younger and I was younger too, we were into like the H3 and like
Yeah.
what's that? Leafy and like
iDubbbz.
pyrocynical, yeah, iDubbbz and shit, and yeah, that like just reactionary bullshit. And so I was like, and this was around the time too, where like the whole incel phenomenon was like kind of like becoming like a well known thing. And I was like, man, I was like, I don't think it's likely. Like I remember telling my girlfriend this. Like I remember this conversation. I was like, I don't think it's that likely, but there's like a non-zero chance that Luke ends up as an insult. And I'm like, I can't let that happen. I was like, I can't. I was like, it will. I was like, all I have to do is talk to him, and it won't happen. But yeah, I like
That's
slowly
exactly what happened.
radicalized. Yeah, and I like slowly radicalized you, and what's really interesting about it, and like the thing with what that happened to me with religion, and what happens to a lot of people with like politics, is it happens so quickly. Like just over the span of like a couple of weeks, you'll go from like slightly interested in communism, like you first starting to look it up, you're first like reading about it or whatever, and then like a couple weeks later, you're like arguing with people in Discord about like the Sino-Soviet split. And it's like it's not like a bad thing. Like it's been years since then, but it's interesting how fast things happen. Because I remember having a couple conversations with you
Yeah.
where you were like really agreeing with what I was saying, and then the next couple conversations you were like contributing and saying stuff that was like blowing my mind. But yeah, just interesting how that happens. But it's really interesting to hear your like thing with the religion too, because I noticed that there was never like a clean break, like and I think that's part of just the differences between our two personalities. Is like I had a very like in my head like I'm done with this. I'm like moving on. with this, and at that same moment, like what you're saying, you're like kind of filled it with nothing. I like had to fill it with something, so I immediately switched from like a religious person to a materialist, and I was like a methodological naturalist, like just like the generic science like way it's done. I wasn't like a dialectical materialist, but I like transitioned immediately from that, like nothing, no like wishy-washy in between. But yeah, it's interesting. You on the other hand, like different personalities will like slowly kind of jettison it, and then when you realize that you have more, so then it was like a conscious decision, really.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Thank you for that analysis. Yeah, who we can move on to get the rest of these recaps. Oh god damn it. Mao.
Yes.
He's being so cute though.
Mao's a
Yes, I hear
reactionary,
you,
bro. He
Dylan.
doesn't want you to talk.
I know he's trying to block my history.
As a bird, I am highly offended.
I know we got cats versus birds in here.
Interesting.
He's a beach. All right, there you go. Just move a little bit. All right.
We wanna
Yeah,
move
Kaylin,
on?
do you wanna start yapping?
Sure. I am going to be very brief, as much as I can.
That's all right.
So, now my experience with religion growing up is kind of interesting because I know my grandparents were relatively religious, but that never really reflected on my parents to where it would, pour out on me. So I didn't exactly get the full religious experience. I did go to church. I did get to experience these things. I got to learn the concepts and the such. But as I got older, I was kind of like, it's not really. I'm not out here practicing it or anything like that. It's just. It doesn't really mean much to me, honestly. So. But what I do understand about it is it's a very, very, very deeply rooted thing, especially within the black community. It's like almost all too common to run across someone who is religious, but apparently it's actually in lower numbers nowadays than it used to be. There's less people actually going to church and such. But anyhow, getting back into me now, whenever I would go over to my grandmother's, like we would go over there on Sundays. Sometimes we would, go to church. I would, hear the preacher, kind of, say his piece and whatnot, saying all the good things about God and the such, and how it pertains to your life and the such. So it kind of gave me a bit more of a, I guess, grounding on like, I don't know. I guess you could say, quote unquote, morally ethic things is what I can, is what I can get out of that. Because ultimately it doesn't really mean much else to me, besides, placing a, creator behind these concepts, and I just don't really particularly believe in the creator. But I personally believe it's it's kind of an internal thing. It's a spiritual thing. It's something that I internalize. It's like there's a God inside all of us. We all are blessed with autonomy. Like I don't know how the fuck we are, but we just are. And I think that's a beautiful thing. I really do. So yeah, there's a God inside all of us.
Yes, thank you. Very interesting perspective. Shiva, do you want to close out this section?
Alright, so for me, I grew up completely and utterly hating the church all the way through. Like, there was no sympathy from me at any point in time. It was mostly because what I grew up with was church 24/7, because I was constantly under my grandparents, and my grandparents were pastor and co-pastor, and they were like, oh my god, it was so weird the way that this church system was set up. It was 12 pastors. 12 pastors set under a bishop.
It did.
Like, if that doesn't sound weird, you're not reading your Bibles. But, like, growing up under this weird system and having to go to church day in and day out, and constantly having this old book hammered into you all the time, it doesn't settle right with you. And until, like, I want to say 6 years ago, that was my life every single day. Imagine going downstairs and church is right there. You wake up in the morning, you go downstairs and, hey, church. Like, quite literally, they're having a sermon right in your face, no choice. But going back to the church in Detroit, this church ran by Bishop Wayne T. Jackson, just for a point of reference. It's a huge mega church. Middle of Detroit, Grand River. It's just absolutely disgusting. It's got so many odd things about it. Like, how do you have 5 businesses just off to the side come in with just extreme amounts of gold on you, excessive amounts of gold, so many cars, like a different car every single day, and you're asking for $3,000 tithes and offering? Cha-ching. Like, absolutely, just absolute disgusting behavior. I don't know when Jesus requested, oh my god. Alright, Luke. I don't know when Jesus just, required you to give $3,000 to your bishop. I'm pretty sure Jesus, flipped over tables of bankers and whatnot. I'm pretty sure I actually read the book instead of just skipping through it like they always do.
They find their favorite parts,
Oh, they always do.
especially the extreme parts.
So, having to see that anywhere I go, living within this country, in the stores, in the banks, like everywhere I go, it's a little too much for me.
Yeah.
It's one of those things that you just have to tolerate. And I have to remember that there are plenty of comrades that have faith, and that the American religion of Christianity is not what it's truly supposed to be. It's deeply entwined with capitalism. And this form of capitalism is an extreme route to the point to where this feeds into sending people into Israel for personal gain. Invading Palestine with citizens from the US by using the church to convince them that it is the sacred land. You must go to Israel. Go vacation in Israel. It's wonderful. Don't worry about all the people dying, right over there, 5 feet away. Don't worry about that. Hey, do you actually want to join our army and, kill those people over there, 5 feet away from your hotel that you just booked into? We might spit on you as well. Just saying. But that's the type of environment that I've grown up in. And I find it absolutely disgusting.
Yeah.
I'm
wow,
sorry.
Thank you
I
for that.
have to be the hate person.
It's all of our own perspectives, that was very, very good. So yeah, thank you everybody for being so open. I thought that was a really good introductory section. I think what we can do now is just kind of jump into a more general discussion. If you have anything interesting you want to add or comment on things that people said. Yeah, I think the floor is open.
I did have one short thing for that. I meant to say in the introductions with the first comrade that spoke, and I'm sorry, because of my parents getting here right when everybody was doing the introductions, I cannot remember anybody's name.
My name's Brendan.
Yeah, Brendan. Okay, I thought so, but I was second guessing myself.
Yeah.
When you were talking about missing the church and missing the community aspect of it, I identified with that really hard too. You
Same.
miss having it's like having a broader family really in a way. That you just see on a weekly basis or more, weekly at average minimum. But what I found can help replace that. Besides political organizing, which can replace it to some extent, but also you don't necessarily want to go to the Communist Party meetings or go to these types of things. And we can be friends, we can be that close, but it's not really quite the same thing, right? You want it to be embedded in the community, just the people. And what has always helped me with this, it's always been kind of easy for me to replace that, which I feel lucky for, is being into being a nerd basically, and being into fandoms and obscure stuff, and going online and meeting people, and then also just going in person. When I would go, when I lived in Kalamazoo, I went to the local comic shop. It was called Fanfare, and there was a year period where I was buying the issues of comics the week they dropped, which obviously is a consumerist capitalist brain kind of activity, which is also the unfortunate thing. It's all of this to replace the church, you have to engage in markets and stuff. But I would go there and I got a sense of community there. I knew not only the people that worked there, but the people that would just chill out there. And there was a big Magic scene there and Warhammer scene there and stuff. And that was just really cool being a part of that. And then also in Kalamazoo, I was in the house show scene, and that was happening on a weekly basis. And concerts, I'm a huge fan of Dave Matthews Band, and I went and saw them live for the first time last year. And the feeling I got being after none of my friends are in Dave Matthews, it took me literally 4 years to get my ex-girlfriend to even give them a chance. No, nobody I knew Dave Matthews. And so going to the concert where there was 10,000 other people there, they were all singing the songs together, and it was all good vibes, just smiles all around, meeting new people and stuff. That gave me the same feeling as a worship service, which really illuminates what's going on. I think in those kinds of religious things is that you saying I miss the community. That's why those people stay. I really think at the end of the days they really value that, and they value, and when they have these spiritual intense experiences during the worship music and all that kind of stuff, it's just making like a really cool vibe, and then they like are they're like down with it. But attached to that is all these idealistic notions as a base, and then a bunch of reactionary bullshit on top, and it's the worst in America, obviously, and like not in other places it's nearly as bad, but it's extremely bad here, obviously, where you can literally go to church. There's like churches, mega churches and stuff you could go to in America, and they're basically giving like political speeches on the pulpit, talking about like literally talking about the woke mobs and endorsing Donald Trump and shit.
Yeah, I guess my desire for community is like I would say like the closest thing that I've found a replacement to religion, which I feel is pretty common for a lot of Marxists and people on the left, is philosophy. Um, for better or for worse, there's a lot of problems with philosophy as well. But um, as far as like wanting a community that is built on a basis of deeper meaning, I feel like I still have this internal need to this like spiritual impulse. I guess I can't call it anything else. But it is this like this want for deeper meaning, and philosophy doesn't always do it for you, you know. But at the same time, as a Marxist and as a historical material, you understand, kind of the lack of a need for a God in the very monotheistic Christian sense. But it's just it's like a weird kind of contradictory relationship where you have this analysis that leads to a conclusion where God is not necessary for a logical world and a logical existence. But at the same time, you have this impulse to want a spiritual belonging and spiritual community at the same time.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a fascinating thing. You got to fill the God hole.
Which is like what religion preys on to a certain extent.
Absolutely.
Too, I feel.
And I think it's also complicated because as Marxists, I think historically we have had a lot of missteps when it came to the way that religion was handled, and the treatment of religious people. And, the reality is that, the vast majority of the international proletariat are deeply, deeply religious. I guess grappling that atmosphere is something that we have to, we can't dismiss. We can't just say, oh, they're just sheeple, as the new atheist movement might say.
They basically take like shaming them as their number one tactic. They think they can literally just like embarrass and shame those people, and make them feel bad enough to like get rid of religion in society. It's very bizarre.
Well, and also the fact that for many people, the lowest of the low class, religion is their life, right? It's their one comfort. It's their family, it's their community, it's their everything, right? When you're not working, you find solace in, if your life is shitty, and miserable, your solace is in God and a life beyond, right? And, as well as the community, right? Your family, it's your friends, right? That it has a very important social function, right? So I think if we deconstruct it and look beyond just like a belief in God, religion is much, much more than that.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, I also want to say too, like, when it's coming to how that all ties in terms of class, you know, that greatly points to what black people in America. You know, it's a widespread thing. You know, you can't really get around it since, you know, mainly when we did get brought over here, it was kind of a situation where our, you know, names, our original religions, which were usually of Western African origin, or they were, you know, in smaller numbers, Christianity, or they were Islam.
Yeah.
So all of that got taken away from us the second we got put on the soil on Turtle Island. So when you look at it that way, it's kind of a weird thing because it's built in. It's built in by design in a way, because it was also used to, you know, to oppress us. Like, religion was legitimately used to oppress us. Like, they have passages in the Bible that they just went by, you know, in terms of it was talking about how slaves should be subservient to their masters. I can't.
Yeah.
know,
Do you
exactly.
real quick? Do you all know about the Slaves Bible?
The Slaves Bible, you said?
They made a whole Bible where they cut out literally everything except for the parts that were like the pro-slavery parts, and then like the four Gospels, and that was the Bible that they preached to the slaves.
No shit. Well, I mean, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Considering
Wow.
a lot of there was a lot of other denominations that were created by black people. You know, there were there was all sorts of types of churches that came about from that. You know, because it's like when you're looking at I don't know, what do you want to call this church? St. George's Methodist Episcopal Church. That was, I believe that was Absalom Jones that created that. Actually, no. So that was the church they were originally at, and then they left and then created the African Methodist Episcopal Church, and then there was a secondary one that was actually made after that. So it's like when you're looking into it that way, it's kind of a built-in thing for us to, you know, also create different denominations that are actually going to better suit us, because the original Bible that, you know, that everyone else is going off of is entirely discrediting exactly, you know, who we are as people, and it's, you know, dehumanizing to us.
Yeah.
Well, and historically, all, you know, especially in the United States, you know, all major civil rights movements, feminist movements, you know, many different, you know, socialist movements, you know, just union working class movements were deeply embedded in religious belief and motivated by religious belief. You know, like there's a strong tradition of liberation theology in the United States.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's why I said I was like, I'm very sympathetic to incorporating religion, like at the very least not being not making the anti-religion a main feature of like of any like communist political movement, because all that does is just like alienate the masses. And it's like you can engage with our religious comrades, because as multiple comrades here pointed out, the overwhelming majority like of the world, the proletariat is and peasantry and every underclass, every upper class, everybody, just the whole world is still very religious, even though it's like we're the least religious that Earth has literally ever been, which is interesting to think about too. But we're still in the state where like the overwhelming majority of people are religious. So it's like you have to like give that the respect that it's due, I guess. But not just like take that like you atheists, like we were saying, just like shame. Like they're not exactly, they're not sheeple. They're not like we don't. That's like tailism or not Taoism, that would be like commandism, to like try and instruct the people to like get rid of their own religion.
Yeah.
Well, then we
Yeah,
talked.
like,
We talked during
Oh
the
yeah.
during the Palestinian committee meeting we had yesterday. We talked about the Islamic character of the current Palestinian liberation movement.
Yeah.
You know, especially when it comes to Hamas, Hezbollah, um, you know, or like with the IRA. The IRA is
Yeah.
very Catholic. So there's lots of there's a long history of radical traditions of religion, and just having a critical support stance, I think, is necessary to having more
Yeah.
nuance.
Yeah. Well, a really interesting thing, and it's not just like black people in America did create a lot of their own denominations and own spaces away from like the white dominated Christianity. But that's the thing that happened to all colonized people as well. Even in China, the very interesting history that I was like just recently really delving into, in the Taiping Rebellion, which was a rebellion not only against the like British colonialism, but against the Qing dynasty itself, that involved 20 million people, and as many people died in the Taiping Rebellion as died in World War One. Like, this was a huge conflict, and the whole thing was based off a Chinese dude who was like lost in life. Like, he had like auditioned, or he had tried for the imperial exams 3 times and failed, and on the third time he was like depressed. He like locked himself in his family home. That he was like the upper peasant like class, and he claimed to have experienced these visions of this like old bearded man and a younger bearded man coming to him, and then he like found a book that a missionary had given his parents, a Christian missionary, and he realized that the visions he was having was God and Jesus coming and telling him that he was Jesus's younger brother, that he was God's son, he was also a son of God. And he at first convinced a bunch of people to like believe in this, and because it wasn't based on any, it wasn't the ideas he had of Christianity and the Bible and stuff, it wasn't based on the missionaries and like what they would be telling him. It was literally just based on him reading the Bible and his own personal experience. So he was like a communalist. Like, he was very similar to like a Robert Owen type, where all like an early like hippie basically, where they like the first things they did was he and a bunch of his followers just went out into the countryside and just like made communes that were like not feudal, that everybody was equal. And that caused problems because the way feudalism works, it's like that's basically how everything is, except every once in a while, not really every once in a while, pretty frequently, some dudes on horses with swords show up and they're like, "Give us some of your shit," and then it all just gets kicked up the chain. And so eventually they came around to these communes, and they were like, "We're not a part of the dynasty. Like, we're not any of that." So then he eventually realized that it wasn't enough just to go out and make communes. They had to like overthrow the society and make all of China into a commune. And this was in like the 1880s. Super interesting how it like mirrors what was going on in a lot of different places. But yeah, so then they start this whole rebellion, but it was like a Christian movement in a way, even though it wasn't tied to any other Christian formation that has like ever existed. It was like a totally unique thing that almost like literally just happened because one dude just happened to like find some inspiration in the Bible and think he was getting these visions, and he was like the son of God.
Yeah, that's a really interesting story. I know there's some more resources about the typing era of China. I think if we can spin the conversation in a new way, because I know Forrest had some things to say that might not be directly connected to this line.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, one thing generally, I kind of I don't really have any like, I guess I have like some sort of like Marxist dialectical materialist for this belief, but like, I kind of think that like post revolution, there will be sort of like in line with there being like a withering away of the state towards on the road to higher stage communism. I think there will also slowly be a withering away of religion, where like, because like as Marx says, like religion is like the opium of the masses. It's sort of like numbs the pain of like the material reality of oppression under class-based society. So like once you alleviate that material oppression, then people kind of don't really like need that sort of like hope in something beyond the material, right? So like I
A
kind of
literal
think that,
second life.
yeah, I kind of think that like the basis for religion will kind of be undermined, and like people will just slowly like won't have a need for religion basically. And then also too, I wanted to um, sort of bounce off of something that Brendan was talking about uh, with like sort of philosophy being like a more like secular religion in a sense of like providing like that sort of meaning to life in the absence of religion. Um, like post my sort of semi-religious phase, like in high school and in college, like philosophy definitely played like an important role in my life and in like my social interactions with my closest friends. Um, and you know, I was really into uh, another socialist who's got an interesting Michigan connection, Ben Burgess. I was really into like you know his YouTube channel and everything like that. Listening to him like talk about philosophy and connecting that with um, left wing ideas and stuff like that. And I really got into sort of like a secular moralist position for a while, and then I eventually discovered another YouTube channel called Carefree Wandering, which is a sort of
Yes.
synthesis of like Eastern and Western philosophies, particularly Taoism, and sort of takes like a more like amoralist position on philosophy, and I found that like really helpful in my life when I was like, you know, really like struggling with depression and stuff a lot, and like uh, I did also like, you know, you know when you're not like super familiar with something and you're just kind of learning something, you know, sort of like a Dunning Kruger effect sort of thing. Like I did like also use these like naively like use the amoralist perspective to like sort of post hoc rationalize and justify like bad behaviors that I engaged in. You know, so like I would say that there's definitely like room in that sort of a thing for like reactionary thinking and beliefs um, for a while, but that was like a few years ago that I engaged with that, and I like bought several books on Taoism and Taoist philosophy from that philosopher. He was currently based in China, I believe. He's German, Hans George Muller. And so I was into Taoist philosophy for a brief time, and sort of had like a sort of I would say anti-moralist perspective on things for a while. Then I kind of drifted away from that back into sort of a more like moralist perspective on things. And then recently, you know, since my depression has really continued and stuff like that, particularly trying to grapple with like um, you know, bad behaviors that I've engaged with in the past, and sort of like having this moralistic framework of like good, bad, and how that's like contributed to like my mental health crisis is like I've sort of re-engaged in these last few weeks with those books from a few years ago on Taoist philosophy, and looking at it now through a different lens. I feel like I definitely understand the arguments better, and I still think there's like room for critique from like a Marxist perspective in those works, but I definitely feel like I have a better understanding now of like what the author was arguing, and I definitely see value in having like an amoralist perspective on things, because I think in a lot of ways like moral argumentation is sort of like secular religion in a sense, and definitely falls into that category of like black and white thinking. And it's interesting too because like during the Cultural Revolution in China, like for many centuries, Confucian thought has really been like the dominant philosophy in China, like the regime of sincerity ethics, that you have social roles and that you have to internalize those social roles so that you genuinely believe and identify positively with those social roles. And also, that's very closely tied to filial piety, which is sort of like the sort of like value and worship of like your elders and stuff like that. And since and like during the Cultural Revolution, they put forth the Communist Party like put forth a lot of Taoist philosophy as like sort of like more like proletarian philosophy, and in particular they one of the things I was reading about recently was like they sort of put on a pedestal the character Robert G, who interestingly enough, I think that if the limited knowledge I have of this interpretation of the Cultural Revolution's understanding of Taoism is correct, I think it's a misinterpretation of the Chuangzi and the depictions of the character Robert G, because the Chuangzi is it uses a lot of irony and satire in its analysis, and so Robert G is sort of depicted as sort of like another as sort of like a anti-Confucian in a sense. So he's like a robber, but he's like a moral robber in a sense, right? And he has like his own like sort of Confucian style like beliefs that guide his actions and stuff like that. And I would say like the Taoist philosophy would actually critique both Confucius and Robert G, and would say like, well, I mean, how can you know that either of these people is correct? And I would also add that Robert G was not. I would call him more of like a sort of like black market capitalist in a sense, not necessarily like a proletarian idol in that sense, because he wasn't like expropriating the land for like benefiting the masses per se. It was just kind of like personal benefit. But yeah, I'll just leave it there for now.
Yeah, wow, that was a lot of good stuff there. Thank you. I also have some interesting history with Taoism. because in my perspective, like we can go into a real deep dive, like comparing the Eastern religions and the Western religions. And those Western religions are much more rooted in like this abstract idealism, monotheism sorts of ideas, whereas Eastern religions, like even Buddhism and Taoism, sort of almost approach it from a different way, more of a like a pseudo materialist way. It's really fascinating. The other thing I wanted to bring up too, because you sort of brought up China and just some examples of religion and socialism. I think it's important for us as like Marxist-Leninists to clarify how we in the current age should relate to religion in our movement. And I think there are some really good examples, real breathing examples of socialism that demonstrate that we can coexist with religious ideology and religious people with very little issue. The easiest example for me to bring up is Cuba. The religious breakdown in Cuba, it's 60% Christian. Of all the people in the entire country, 60% of them are Christian. That's like a majority of the people. Yet they still have this single-bodied unity, dictatorship of the proletariat, socialist road, all of these things. So, like as we understand as Marxist-Leninists, class struggle continues in socialism. Contradiction is everywhere, even in socialism. But that's not going to, kill the revolution. And I think Cuba is a really good living example of that. Yeah.
Which, yeah, can I jump in, or does anybody else want to?
For sure.
Like I said, I don't want to monopolize the conversation.
Brendan is off the mic for the moment, but
like what you were saying, Luke. One thing I was gonna say, I saw that too. Like for one thing, I was really coming to mind with what Forrest was saying, and then what you were just saying too, Luke, is that at the end of the day, there are big differences between like what we could call Eastern philosophy and Western philosophy, and Eastern religion and Western philosophy, and generally the East versus the West in general. But at the end of the day, these things are not that fundamental. They're not fundamentally different, and they're not really that different in the first place. But one big difference is that the Confucianism, Taoism, Buddhism, even a lot of stripes or flavors, or however you want to say it, of Hinduism are technically speaking atheistic. They don't actually. There's nothing in there about a god, and yet from an anthropological standpoint, we still call them religions. They're still clearly religions. So like religion really, it doesn't really. At the end of the day, it has nothing to do. It's not solely the domain of this of like a monotheistic model of a god. And that's another thing I meant to include in my whole introduction. Is like one of my special interests basically is like studying religion and ancient religion, especially on like a layperson academic level. Like I'll listen to like lectures and stuff from professors, and one thing that is like right when you go into religious studies that they drill in your head, there is no difference between like ancient religion and modern religion. Like you go back and you look at like the ancient Greeks and the gods they worship, the ancient Romans and the gods they worship, the way all that happened in the role of playing society and everything, it is the exact same as how it functions today. And when you look at it from a Marxist perspective, which is rare in academia, but I have found to apply my own analysis to it, of course it would be similar. We're still living in class society. So it's still it takes different shapes, and it might be even radically different given different stages of class society when it ruptures into a new stage. But at the end of the day, it serves the same function. And that's what I say with the Eastern and Western philosophies. Aristotle was in communication, like direct letter communication, with Chinese ancient philosophers. It doesn't get more like East and West than that. And a very strange thing that is a consequence of Christianity is what makes, like, historically speaking, Christianity is very unique. It is a religion like the rest, but it is very strange and unique. Is that it steamrolled all of the indigenous religions at the time, even in Rome. Like, how does the ancient Roman Empire go from a couple hundred years of being polytheistic and having all these cultic practices. Which I should just define that term really quick when we're speaking of like ancient religions and like anthropologically speaking. When I say like cult or cultic practice, like a cultic practice literally just refers to like a ceremony. Like from that anthropological sense, a wedding as it's performed in like Christian countries, or like a sermon, that's like a cultic practice. Like that's all I mean. I don't mean like a cult as in like the modern definition, like Jonestown shit. But Christianity steamrolled all that, and then went deeper into Europe and got rid of all what they called the pagans and all these native religions that existed in all these places. And all of those religions and the way that they conceptualized the world was much closer to how what persisted in the East until the modern day, with like the Confucianism and the like what you said, Luke, like the quasi materialist almost framework, where they're like I said in my opening spiel, is like there's a recognition that like the real world is the real world, whereas like in Christianity it almost like rejects that in a weird way. It's like the real world is nothing but a like reflection of God's mind that He made, and the true real world is like what's happening in heaven, and like this is the lowest form of reality, which is like somewhat unique. You don't find that in a lot of like religions around the globe. And then even more interesting, what is truly like a thing that did not communicate with the rest of the world for hundreds of years, American indigenous religions, which are even further that like kind of quasi materialistic kind of thing. And the study of that is super interesting and tragically difficult, because so much of that history and culture has been erased and demonized, and we can't trust the sources we have. Like you can't go back to like some Spanish conquistador in the 15th century writing about like the religious practices of the Aztecs or whatever, because like they're just spouting off a bunch of bullshit that like justifies their genocide. So it's really hard to investigate that stuff. But the last thing I'll say, the other thing that was coming to mind with what Forrest was saying with the Confucianism and the Taoism, how a lot of it is centered around you accepting your social role and like finding peace in that and a genuine acceptance of that, and like this like hierarchy and that like regime of I can't remember I know what it is. I was on to my tongue. But that is very similar to a lot of religions, and why I say like not only does it justify capitalism, at the end of the day, what it is telling people to do is to accept their roles in society, which now we understand through a Marxist lens that is class. Like it's just telling people to be okay with being exploited. And when you study ancient religion and ancient history in general, you always have to have that class analysis in the back of your mind. And this is the thing that is shockingly mainstream. They don't take like a Marxist lens, but I've heard from the most liberal professors, they'll be like, yeah, why did this stuff survive? Why do we have a text, the Dead Sea Scrolls? Why do we have a text of the Bible, of the Hebrew Bible, of like Zoroastrian Bibles, of ancient Hittite religions? What was that? The big, the huge empire before that, the Babylonians. Why do we have that stuff? Because it was why the stuff that we have is preserved until this day. Text that we find, stuff we uncover in archaeology. Well, who made that? It was the upper classes that commissioned that stuff to be made. The cheaper stuff among the lower classes, a lot of which was just spoken throughout the vast majority of human history. People have been illiterate. Most people, like the overwhelming majority of people in all of human history, haven't been able to write anything. So there's nothing for to be even preserved. So when you look back and it's like, why was that stuff preserved? It's because the people in power wanted it to be preserved. That is ultimately like what it comes down to. And you look back at ancient Western philosophy, which everybody's really familiar with in America and in the West. We venerate like the Aristotles and the Socrates. Why you go back and you read Aristotle and Plato and you're reading their stuff and it's like, oh, like they're tackling deep philosophical stuff, epistemology, and all these deep philosophical concepts, and then you'll turn the next page and they're talking about how like the natural way of society is for there to be like slaves and slave masters, and women are like less endowed than men, and all this stuff. And you're like, where did all that come from? Well, it's because they were saying that stuff, and the people that weren't saying that stuff, we have to resuscitate it from history, and that's why history is like a real passion of mine. You have to like read in between the lines of the text we have preserved, of the material culture we have preserved, of the archaeology, and like read through all of it to figure out what was like really going on with the average person. How did just the lower classes live in like ancient Rome? And when you like introduce the religious aspect to it, it gets really interesting, and you can relate to those people. Like the experience that I've had with religion in my personal life, like in my whole life, is mirrored in the experiences of like a slave in Rome, like 4,000 years ago, or like 2,200 years ago, 4,000 years ago in like Babylon and Egypt and stuff. And like being able to relate to those like ancient people is very is a special thing, which is why that study of ancient religions and stuff fascinates me so much.
I actually have a question that I wanna pose to all of you, but because it's interesting because we Forrest touched on it a bit. You know, this very orthodox Marxist idea of the withering away of the need for organized religion. But I hesitate
Mhm.
to that um, spirituality and spiritual belief in a fully materially communist society would not exist. Um, and I hesitate because I think, there are instances in, primitive communist societies that are very materially, animist, where they live communally. They don't necessarily have, any,
Mhm. Yeah.
extreme class differences in the way that we see today, I'm speaking mostly about hunter gatherer
Mhm.
society,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
the
The most ancient shit. Yeah.
right, and the in their religions, were not so coincidentally, very, deeply tied to the land, to the environment. They were extremely based in their current material circumstance. You look at like, the indigenous peoples,
Mhm.
the various, Inuit, societies, and all of their, creation myths and all of their, particular, beliefs about, how the world came to be are entirely related to and deeply embedded in, the environment of, far north Canada, and, the the frigid environment that they lived in, the ice and the animals that lived in that Arctic area. So I guess, like, do you think that this is all speculative, but I guess in the development, as capitalist society develops, and the contradictions are raised, and potentially material conditions change to be ripe for, a communist transition, you know, might we see a breakdown of these highly idealistic, monotheistic sort of societies back into a what looks like an advanced or transformed stage of, animist spirituality?
Yeah.
That's just an interesting question to me. Um,
I have something I've been thinking about when you were
Yeah.
just
I
talking.
think like
All right,
oh, you go ahead, Luke. You go ahead.
yeah, I'll jump first. I guess to me, this whole idea of the self, this thing that we all have, like this sense of like me, the spirit, myself. Uh, that is something that has arisen because of society, right? That's something that only exists because of society, and the fact that we exist in a society of other, conscious beings.
We only
And
have
that development of consciousness
yeah.
is a process that's been going on since the very early days, like you're saying in primitive communism. Our increased consciousness of what society is, the fact that we are all continually perpetuating it and developing it and building it through our creative actions. And so I guess like in my speculative understanding of the future, the understanding that will come about is that there is no separation between this idea of the self and the idea of the society and the idea of the material world. All of those things will sort of blend into one. And the animism kind of gets at that as well. It's like, well, the animals and the humans and the society, all these things are part of the material world, like one big process going on. And so it's not necessarily like breaking down the idea of like spirituality and saying like this thing is wrong. It's really just giving it the materialist answer is like, no, it's just a specific thing that's arisen because of this really crazy, unique thing called society. That's my understanding.
That's
Yeah, and I know.
that like.
It's not like a moral condemnation. It's a functional, like the function of religion change and diminish.
I also want to say too, there's a relationship too between between Christian denominations and like egalitarianism and such. Like for example, Quakers,
right?
Like they were at the forefront of
we have some
of
Quaker
denouncing
comrades,
slavery, like literally, like they were at the forefront of that.
Absolutely,
and they were the first religious sector like within America to actually even go like, hey, like that's not cool and shit. Even in Britain, because like they were, kind of planted, wherever.
Mm-hmm.
But that's what they believed, and they are, under the belief that all men are created equal, and that's what they practiced.
Mm-hmm.
But even by their standards, like
follow that to its like logical conclusion.
Like extreme by by other denominations, which is like crazy to me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and what I was gonna say to the question and what Luke said too, with like the consciousness, like that the knowledge is such an important part of it. Like you said, Luke, it's like when society was first emerging, primitive like communism, when they were first becoming a social being, they saw themselves reflected in reality. So you see the winds brush the leaves, and they assigned agency to that because everything they understood came from their own agency. They like the act of transforming the world enables you to understand what it means to transform the world. And we've been on like that journey of actually understanding what that means for like the literal past like 100,000 years, if you depending on your periodization. And so they ascribed like agency to everything they saw in the world: animals, the wind, like I said, lightning, fire, the plants, everything. Everything was a conscious creature, just like they were. And that eventually evolved into the idea of gods, which is I can't remember who said it, but that there's a God in all of us, and that is also like reflected. Like gods are just constructions of human beings. Human beings made them, and from like an anthropological standpoint, that's super interesting. Why humans would do that, and so like, will spirituality, will religion, like, will that hole get filled? It's like it really comes down to this. Like if like the way I look at it is like through this lens of there's always going to be some questions that we can't answer, and maybe not. Maybe like we will figure out all the answers to the whole universe. I don't know. Like that's like I'm really agnostic on that position. So long as there is answers that we haven't, questions that we haven't answered about like what happened, like when in the Planck time, when our understanding breaks down, what really is going on in black holes, what really is going on like below quark level. All these questions that we've brought to like such an extreme degree, but there's still these questions. And it almost comes down to a psychological thing where it's like I've, as a part of my religious deconstruction, I've become comfortable saying, I don't know. why is there something rather than nothing? Why does the universe exist? I don't know. And I'm comfortable with that, and a lot of other people genuinely are not. And it's not a judgment thing. I don't look down on them. It's just it's a psychological thing of like being different. Where some people are like they're not comfortable just saying I don't know, so they plug in the God. They're like, oh, because God, because of any other matter, any other out of a list of spiritual interreligious beliefs. And where it gets speculative and really interesting is when the social being like fully matures and we've reached like that communist society, not even socialist, but like fully communist society. And the intersection of that with psychology, what is the psychology of those people going to be? Like, are they going to have that need? Is it going to reach a point where everybody's just comfortable saying, I don't know about certain things, and everyone is like engaged in a collective, like society-wide like effort to uncover those secrets, and that like we're all aware that like the goal of society is like expanding our knowledge and consciousness, because it's always been that. But like that's really what communism is to me, is like when everybody is on board that project, like consciously knows that that is like what society is doing. So like in the future, it really is like it obviously it's speculative, but will those people call that what they're engaged in spirituality? Like, will they use those terms? Will they refer to it in that way? Because that's really all that matters. Like we're descriptivists when it comes to definitions, not prescriptivists. Like words don't have meanings unto themselves. It's social reality is socially defined.
Yeah, and in many ways, I think that is
Thing is,
the
they
project
mean to
of
us and they meant to our like ancient ancestors. It's impossible, but it's interesting to think about.
Slight
Yeah.
delay. Wait, Brendan, what were you saying?
Yeah, I think a lot of that is part of the project of philosophy more broadly,
Right.
and at least the more materialist and radical, because of course, there's a extremely reactionary subsets of the world of philosophy, but the ones who are truly interested in progressing ideas further, as as in turn material society progresses, I think those ones are going to be at the forefront of the development of ideas as material conditions change, and society progresses. But yeah, and I think we're on the forefront of that. Really, I mean, we are in that weird middle stage between the domination of religion as this all-encompassing demagogue, in the days of the Catholic Church,
Humanity is a teenager, bro.
right? And some people think science is the new religion, and I don't know. The development of society, holds those answers, but whatever it is, I think we should always hold the materialist, view in mind that, however religion and its role progresses, it will reflect the needs and effects of uh, economic and material conditions.
One Piece is the new religion.
One Piece overall.
Does anybody else have new tangents they want to jump into? I know Forrest, you can't speak right now, but Shaylin and Kiva.
What?
Gotta be tongue twisted here.
I was just wondering how we remove the rampant imperialism from religion. Like honestly, that's all I wanted to know.
Free Palestine.
Like, for real.
That's a great question. And like I brought up earlier, religion, it finds itself in all societies, socialist, capitalist, feudal, all of these societies. But I think we all understand as well that like religion is a integral piece of imperialism and fascism and the justification of these things. So it's just something we're inevitably going to run into in the anti-imperialist movement. But on that same hand, I think like Palestine is a great example, where the religious character of the movement can be used almost in a progressive sense, where it's like, well, we can expose Zionism as being like an anti-Semitic, anti-Jewish movement, or find value in the or in like the pro-Muslim community. Like Islamophobia is a big factor in this movement as well. So it's like there's an interesting contradiction and dynamic going on there, where on one hand, like religious extremism is used to justify settler colonialism and imperialism, but there's also this on the other side of that, where there's people who feel their religion is being attacked or persecuted by these things. So yeah, I don't know. I'm just kind of waffling, but I think it's a really important question to raise.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
like an important like way to look at this is the Leninist consumption, and like part of the importance of Lenin is what is the Communist Party? What is the communist role? And so much of it comes down to finding that balance between commandism and tailism, where we want to be with the masses, and to contrast with the example you gave, where it's like we have this in Palestine, we have this revolutionary movement that has a strong religious character. Well, in America, we have a fascist movement with a strong religious character. At the same time, there are Christians that are against Donald Trump, to a large extent because of their Christianity. Our parents, for example,
Right.
an ally with, and with the liberation theology in South America and stuff, you can ally with religious people. But in the Communist Party, and this is why, like I said to you on multiple occasions too, Luke, I'm like, I am totally fine having religious comrades, way more so than anybody on this call. Like people who are like, yeah, I actively am a part of this religion. I engage in Christianity, in Islam, in Judaism, in Hinduism, whatever it is. I'm perfectly fine having that. But when we're in our Communist Party meetings, when we're planning the revolution, when we're deciding what the Communist Party should do, that is not the place to like bring up the religion. It's not that like it's something that we take our time out of our day to bash, but that's just not the place for it. That's just not something that like that's not what is determining this group's actions. And that is like what it means to be a Leninist party, is like not follow the masses, but also not command them, but also have a rigorous, correct line within the party. And that only comes about from like internal debate and a scientific analysis of reality. And we have to be rigorous about that and committed to that. And and I don't understand it. I don't like there are some like Hakeem, a fantastic example. A big part of my radicalization was like watching Hakeem and his YouTube channel. I don't understand, genuinely, on like that psychological level, which also gets to like the different character that, especially white Christianity, as like a white like hetero cis presenting person. The white Christianity in America is extremely toxic and like hurt me. So I understand that I'm to a certain extent like against it more than like the typical citizen of Earth, the typical like person on this planet. But at the same time, I genuinely like psychologically cannot understand how Hakeem can be like so thoroughly dialectical materialist and at the same time subscribe wholeheartedly to the claims of Islam and the claims of the Quran, which are so blatantly supernatural and idealistic. And they have this cognitive dissonance going on, and that's fine. I understand that. But like I said, at the same time, when we're having our meetings about like what the party should do next, that is not the time to bring up, oh, we should do this because of what it says in this religious text. That is like completely inappropriate. But at the same time, if we want to organize with some religious organizations that are not communist, even, because that's a whole other question. It's like the Communist Party allies and works with non-communist organizations all the time. So non-communist religious organizations, it should be no problem, like working with them. But at the same time, you keep them at arm's length. And all that means is you don't come out and start calling them communists and start calling them the leaders of the movement. Like at the end of the day, the Communist Party, what it is the leader of the communist revolutionary movement. and it's a whole other conversation whether or not that party, that thing exists in America. But yeah, I like what you were saying there, like how we decouple imperialism from a religion. I think like having a strong Leninist party and conception of the party is like critical to that.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that, and I think I think part of the solution is to make a distinction between, because like, you know, if we're going to be materialists, historical materialists, we can't deny the role that religion plays in our own lives, whether we are religious or not. You know,
Yeah.
it's going to have an
Yeah.
effect on us, and I think part of the answer is understanding, like, religion, let religion and spirituality affect our hearts but not our minds, where, if that's something that gives you meaning and motivates you to action, you know I think that is what religion is there for. It's there to give you purpose and, meaning, but it's not science, and it doesn't give you answers in the way that science and the scientific analysis of material conditions, that is Marxism, provides
Yeah,
you.
scientific socialism. Yeah.
Right.
I like the
action.
phrase like skepticism of the mind, but optimism of the heart. To like
Right.
have the
Yeah.
hope
Yeah.
and like the belief that, like, yeah, this movement is going to inevitably succeed, but
Right.
still having like that almost pessimistic idea of like, well, we have to assume the worst and we have to prepare for the worst.
Right. And if
Otherwise, it won't
a
succeed.
humanist,
Yeah.
if a secular humanist love of humanity is what motivates you, or a love of God, materially, that is that it doesn't make a difference when the guiding principles that motivate the party's actions are that of an analysis of historical and current conditions of class society.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think
So,
Forrest had something to add. Can you unmute? Are you able to?
Yeah. I was
Okay.
just gonna say, yeah, I do kind of agree with like what Pete was saying with like that there will be have to be some degree of like what do they call it in like social systems theory, like functional differentiation,
Yeah.
where like
Yeah.
the uh, you know communists do the communism and the religious people do the religion and stuff like that, and those things will be like separate to some extent. I guess my critique of that would be that all of these different things like influence one another in different ways, and so like
Yeah.
that's sort of my critique of like the social systems theory of like functional differentiation, is like all these things like overlap to some extent and influence one another in some way, and I think just acknowledging that and like being able to like deal with that, like it, if religious folks like are communist and like use like liberation theology, for example, to help rationalize and justify their like participation in the movement, then I think that's ultimately a good thing in the end. But I will also say too that when we talk about ideas like religion or philosophy or morality and stuff like that, similar to like any other tool, it doesn't, like, in some ways it makes sense to talk about like uses and abuses of tools, but like in a sense, like when these tools were invented, like the lines between uses and abuses were blurred to the sense that like it doesn't make sense to make like a distinction between those. Like, for example, like take an axe. Like you can say like, oh, like an axe was designed to like chop wood, right? But then like that's its use. But then like when people use it to chop off people's heads, that's like a bad use or whatever, or like an abuse, right? But like to a certain extent, like these tools don't know like right and wrong, right? Like they just kind of exist, and like it wouldn't make sense to talk about like banning axes because they can be used to like chop off people's heads and whatnot, right?
You could use a power cord to choke somebody out and kill them.
Yeah, and so like in that yeah, and like in that same vein, like like I think that like when it comes to like religion or philosophy or morality, like all of these things are ultimately just tools, and what we should do is just exercise like extreme caution when handling these tools, so that we do so in a way that is, I think, minimizing their use, to not like overuse them, but then also to like use them in ways that are predominantly beneficial for people overall.
Yeah.
Stuff like that. Yeah.
Comrade Shiva, we have not heard from you since the beginning.
Be mean.
That would
Be
be
nasty.
a lie, but okay. I mean that. Once again, that would be a lie, but okay.
Really, I didn't hear you. Maybe I wasn't paying attention well enough.
Alright, let's see. So, I don't really see too much of a use with religion whatsoever. Like, I've been through the religious cycles, everything Muslim, Hindu, blah blah blah. I care not. I'm sure some people, they may need it. It may come to a point in their life to where they may need to turn to whatever god they pray to. That's cool and all, but I still don't see a point in it for it to carry on.
Yeah, and like, I feel you with that, and that's like a big conflict. Is like, but so many people do, and like I take them at their word. So many people genuinely do see a reason to like carry on with it, and it's hard to like internalize that, to like understand that. It's like genuinely hard for me to understand that now, because I'm in a very similar place. I'm like, I see no point to it.
What is that? Did we invite
R.
a tornado?
I think that's the voice of God trying to contribute here.
Yeah, trying to contribute.
That guy owes me $5.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like if I could smack my fingers and like tomorrow the whole world would just wake up and not be religious at all. Like I said in my like intro, I genuinely think that would be like a better world. But at the same time, if the whole world just woke up tomorrow and got rid of class society, got rid of capitalism, that would obviously also be a better world. But that's not going to happen. That's not like how it is, and that's not how it's going to go.
And I think a lot of the problem with the predominant discourse on people who criticize religion, they get part of the answer correct, but when there's no class analysis or understanding
Yes.
of religion's role, because religion is an arm of capitalism. Let's just put it that way. Organized religion is a part of the just like the state, right? Just like the state,
Yeah.
where
And like I would say, class society in general, the current permutation of class society is capitalism. So like
right,
what you said is
so
correct, but
so to
but like
talk
all class society rose is part of.
right, so to talk about it like it's separable from capitalism is to misunderstand it. Um, and I think that like when we talk about like people who criticize religion without understanding why it exists in the first place, I think are missing the larger picture that
Yeah.
it it serves this it serves a vital role in justifying a lot of the ways that society are organized, right? Like where religion just so happens to associate the all-powerful God of all of the universe with a king or a lord,
Yes,
right?
exactly.
Where where you are like this all-powerful being just so happens to recreate the exact social structures that govern the society that it was born out of.
Yeah.
You know, so
And look at the portrayals of God in ancient
right,
society. Sat on a throne, rode on chariots, wore the same gear as the military. In medieval society, sat on a throne, rode horses, looked the same as those people. In modern society, looks like a wise old man.
right, and or the fact that he even is a man, right?
Yep.
And that
Or a shrimp.
in a highly patriarchal society and social order, that the all-powerful God of the universe would be a extremely masculine man.
Yes.
Right.
To get super explicit, with a penis. There's a fantastic biblical scholar named Francesco, and I'm not even going to attempt her last name. It's like it's like Stakapanula or something like that. It's like a crazy like Southern European last name. But she wrote a book. She's wrote multiple, but her book Anatomy of God, where she's talking about Yahweh, the Jewish, Christian, Muslim God, and she goes back. She's a scholar. Goes back to the ancient sources, the oldest text we have, and analyzes all that to figure out what is the image they had of God. And there are ways you can read lines of the Bible that they would have read back then that literally refer to Yahweh's member and how big and huge it was.
Amazing.
That I did not know.
It's so deeply misogynistic, which like misogyny and like the patriarchy in general, that's like the first class division. It's almost like a proto class division. Is like the division between genders and the whole setup of gender roles. Like, isn't that insane? How that transverses all sorts of societies.
Right.
Like I was saying, with like how East and West are way more similar than you would think. Both of them have this like firm delineation between man and woman, because that is some ancient shit.
Yeah, and the fact that in most ancient societies, the most powerful person in any given social strata was the religious class.
Yep.
Or like within Hinduism, right?
Yeah.
The highest the highest
The Brahmins.
class is the priests, the clergy, essentially, even though clergy is a very Catholic term for it.
Yeah, but it's just different words. Which I was also talking to my current girlfriend about this the other day. I'm like, that's another thing religion does that's super weird. In a secular setting, it's a podium. in a religious setting, it's a what do they call it? A lectern, and like it's not like they have all these different words for the same thing, and they switch up the words, which is which is so strange that like that's the thing. But yeah, that's the other thing I was gonna say. In ancient Rome, the emperors were literally gods, literally demigods. Upon their death, they were worshipped as gods in the pantheon of the rest of the gods.
Yeah, it reminds me a lot of ancient Egypt and the pharaohs.
Yep. Yeah.
So I think it's very interesting from an anthropological perspective, because when you look at religion, you see it's a mirror for class society and social strata.
Yeah. That's the other thing too. You were saying like when you watch or listen to or read modern like critiques of religion, liberal critiques, is so frustrating because they're not like class based. They get so close, and the closer they get, the more frustrating it is. Like I don't know if any of y'all have heard of it started out as like a public access show in Austin, Texas, and now it's like a YouTube channel, a pretty successful one too, like millions of subscribers, hundreds of thousands of views per video and clip and live stream. The Atheist Experience, and it's a call-in show where these people who are self-described atheists literally just open up a phone line and theists from all across America call them.
I know
They
you're
have
talking
like
about.
5 channels. They have like
Oh
5
yeah, it's
separate
huge now.
channels.
It's huge. Yeah, it's huge now. And there was actually a split. There's been multiple splits, but there was a split which led to the development of this other YouTube channel and network, basically, where the main dude who was like the main guy behind the host of the Atheist Experience, Matt Dillahunty, he went to this whole other network called The Line, where they basically do the same thing. Yeah, yeah. Well, he exemplifies it so much, where it's like they get so close, they'll literally talk, like they'll basically describe how religion is a class-based thing, is a misogynist thing, and they have all the most socially progressive views. They're all pro-LGBT. Like that was why this split happened, because the Atheist Experience had on a person who was like English-style transphobe. Like he was from Britain and was like a TERF, like a J.K. Rowling style TERF, and that's why Matt Dillahunty left, and that's why I'm like, yeah, I do like despise him to a certain extent, but he's right about a lot of stuff, and he literally left because they're being transphobic, and like they understand all that. They're like anti-patriarchy. There are all these things, but the class element is missing, and it's so frustrating because like they get so close where they describe how it buttresses that, but they don't like go the full way. And a big problem with it is that they've like identified a religion as the main problem in society, which is like we've spent a lot of time in this conversation talking about how like religion buttresses reactionary thinking, but it also the anti-religion, the hardline atheist, the problem with that new atheist movement is in a way it's ultra leftism. They identify religion as like the main problem. They're like, if we got rid of religion, then society would be like perfect. It would be communism essentially. Like they don't refer to it in those terms, but they'll literally. I've literally heard them say things like, "Without religion, we would have an egalitarian society," which is literally just a synonym for communism.
Videos aside from
In like that, in that way.
A lot of things that motivate me to.
And so, like that's like an ultra leftist tendency is to like identify any single problem with class society and blow it up to be like the central problem. The only thing that is actually like that is the actual material relations that are not just this consequence of a toxic class society, but are the basis of it, where it's like it all comes down to the production of society, which loops back into like what we were talking about with the animism and everything in ancient primitive communism. The reason they were so closely tied, but they had such a low consciousness, like a low knowledge level of what was actually going on. but they were so tied to the land and the
There are a
functioning
lot
of
things that motivate me
of
to make
the reality, the churn,
videos.
the like they were
have
very,
always
very
liked
like
making
the social
things
being
and then
society.
showing
It's
them to
separated
people.
from the natural world,
When I
but
was
it's a part
little,
of
I
it.
used to draw
And they
comics
were the
and
closest that we have
write
ever been to the
stories,
natural society,
and I would show them to people.
or the natural world. I mean, and so they were very closely tied to that, which is an interesting thing. Also, because of this, indigenous societies all across the world, which indigeneity. When I use the word indigenous, I'm referring specifically to the context of settler colonialism. Otherwise, I would use the word like native or original or whatever you want to say, because indigeneity specifically arises within that contrast of settler and indigenous. But indigenous societies across the world are the forefront of the environmental movement, and they have that relationship with the literal land that they are tied to. And the reason that for that, and like why we're going to get back to that eventually, hopefully, is like that tie to the literal production of a classless society where everybody understands that we're all living off the resources like of the literal like world around us. We're just an extension of the world around us, and like taking that responsibly of like society is we become the stewards of that, and we're fucking it up majorly right now and like destroying the environment. And only through like everybody realizing that we're the stewards of it can we can we save it. But now I've lost where I was coming from that with religion. But yeah, with the atheist experience and everything, like they get so close, and so far because they don't have that like class based analysis like of the situation. That was a ramble. I'm sorry.
No, that was good.
No, that was very good.
I think another interesting trend among a lot of it's always the ones who like heavily identify with atheism, which is like a weird thing to identify with a non-belief, but
yeah.
or make it like your whole personality. But but one thing that I found kind of really disturbing, I think, which is a new development, is the settler colonial and imperialist ideology that is baked into a lot of anti-religious attitudes.
Yeah.
Like Christopher Hitchens is a great example.
To the point. Yes, exactly. And real quick, I'll interject. What's his fucking name? Richard Dawkins identifies as a cultural Christian. Cultural Christian.
Right. It's the most like white supremacist shit ever. And a lot, Christopher Hitchens is a well outspoken, anti, Islamic person, and which is weird because why would you be specifically criticizing Islam over other religions if you're an atheist?
Yeah.
But because so there's
it's so tough. You got to like ride that line because it's like at the same time Islam is as reactionary as all these other religions, and I am at the end of the day anti-Islam. But I also understand that being anti-Islam in my context of the world I live in America it has a lot of baggage that is super reactionary and like justifies all these horrendous fucking things. That
exactly.
The ultimate tie towards Zionism is like is a big part of it.
Well, in being Muslim in the United States, it has a racial character to it as well.
Yes.
There is when people talk about oh, those immigrants or oh, those Muslims, they're not talking about the faith. They're talking about the color of your skin. And so
and it's such a broad part of the world. It's everything from the Arabian Peninsula all the way to Palestine to the Levant, all the way to the fucking India and the Philippines. It's literally just anybody who has brown skin.
What were you gonna say, Caleb?
I kind of want to pick up on the anti-Semitism thing because that's very synonymous within the the Black Israelites, the Hebrew Israelites. As
Yes.
Yeah, so
Yakub.
they,
We can talk about your food.
Oh God. Oh man. Oh God. That big-headed dude. Like, what the? Like, he was a scientist. He created white people, guys. It's totally real.
Oh, like uncritical support for Yakubo, like for real.
Like the best. No, but my whole point that I was making is that just within the Black Hebrew Israelite religion, it's adjacent to Christianity. It's very much so that, but there's a return to the homeland aspect. There's a kind of a separatist type of thing going on there where it's a little alarming because there's also it differs from person to person, of course, for how extremely they would associate themselves with said religion, but some of them actually do side with with like Hitler and the such, like they openly advocate that. They're like, oh yeah, like that was necessary because like they weren't the real Jews, we were. So they would constantly parrot that sort of ideology and pass that off as absolute fact, which it's like the history behind that is it's very diverse. I mean, like of course there was like the the Moors and the such, but I feel like that's a very specific sector of Black people. Very specific. It's not this.
Yeah, it's niche.
To every single one.
It gets blown up by white supremacy to like be all of Black people.
Right.
Like in their like racial scares, and yeah, that's just so frustrating.
It's very frustrating because it's like we're all very diverse and very different. Some of us don't even speak the same language.
Yeah,
Really don't.
just like all humans, for Christ's sake.
I'd just like to add something. Kind of what I was talking about yesterday at the Palestine for the inaugural Palestine Solidarity Committee meeting was that post World War II, and especially like since 9/11, post World War II, after anti-Semitism kind of became like a thing where you can't be anti-Semitic, right? Like since then, like the new in vogue thing has been being Islamophobic. Islamophobia is kind of like a replacement for anti-Semitism.
Which is like the intersection of Semitic people and Muslim people. They're just the same. They're just not Christian.
Yeah, and so yeah, I just think that like it's really interesting that you see like someone like Destiny, for example, who like is very much one of those like new atheist people who's like very much like surprisingly enough not like super critical of like other religions, but very critical of like Islam.
Of Islam, yep.
Yeah, and like very interestingly like courts a lot of fascists and stuff like that. So it's like it is like just like the new like in vogue thing for fascists is to like be Islamophobic.
Yeah. Which like gets to the core of it. Israel is an anti-Semitic fascist state. And even deeper than that. I'm not anti-Semitic. None of us are anti-Semitic. But like I was saying earlier, if I snapped my fingers and there was no religion tomorrow, the world would be a better place. That includes Islam and Judaism. And at the same time, I understand that both those populations, in the context of America and Western Europe, have been heavily oppressed and are demonized. The war on terror was just a big excuse to like increase surveillance on like on everyday, even white Americans, and then like expand imperialism abroad and enter the Middle East. Because what we call the Middle East, the West Asia, extremely important place, resource-wise, and not even just oil. all sorts of stuff in that area. And U.S. imperialism is heavily invested in like maintaining control of that area. And when you really study Middle Eastern politics, which have been based on religion, a lot of the times have been a big component of those struggles. It's been a series of decolonial, anti-colonial struggles that have like been defeated and faced different like setbacks, which is very unfortunate. But like it gets to the broader analysis of like we're still living in this period of decolonization. Like the anti-colonial period that was started in the 50s and 60s is still going on today. But yeah, the anti-Semitism has like the Islamophobia has replaced anti-Semitism 100%. Like that is 100% true. Where it's like they just demonize Muslim people, which has deep roots in European thought. Even prior to European colonialism, they were doing the Crusades, which is really like the start in a way of European colonialism. But like that's the thing I was going to say too, Luke. I was talking to Dad about this the other day to loop it in with like the black Hebrewites and stuff. There are those black nationalists, black Hebrewites, black separatists and stuff. Even black supremacists, and not African, black supremacists that are like black people not only should have their own place, but are like the supreme race in America. Obviously, that's like a misguided ideology, but I understand where that's coming from.
Yeah, that something like that is it's a strict impossibility, especially in America, because when you think about like some of the insurrections that we had, like Nat Turner's insurrection, the German Coast insurrection, they were unsuccessful in both of those aspects. However, what actually did happen as a result of that was it sent shockwaves throughout the country, letting everyone know that that was possible, and that scared a lot of the evangelicals because that was their original scare in the first place for when black people were originally being baptized. So that created a weird situation where, that led into the Civil War, like real nicely, like really nicely.
Yeah.
Because there became civil unrest. Like, there was nothing you could really do about it.
Yes. The slaves were revolting.
But
people like want to whitewash that away. So
right, but also looking at the Haitian Revolution, that inspired a lot of these uprisings. But that was successful because they actually were able to outmaneuver and outnumber their oppressors. That was the main difference. That was the key difference between their success versus our failure. That was the key.
Interesting.
After the Haitian Revolution, the South readjusted how many white people, the literal white person to enslaved black person ratio. They changed that after the Haitian Revolution.
Right, and that was and that was kind of that was just something that we had to again still live with because we were still enslaved. Like no matter what. There was stiffer legislation put up against us to stifle our progress going forward after the whole Nat Turner thing. Like, the South went crazy over that shit. Like, they actually went crazy over that. Like, yeah, sure, Nat Turner got, murdered, rest in peace. Like, seriously, rest in peace. But, the thing that really makes me, thing that makes me a little bit more proud of what he did is the fact that it let us all know that that's what needed to be done. That reminded us exactly what needed to be done. Especially in the face of our oppressors, because we can't sit back idly and do nothing. Otherwise, change will not happen. Period.
Right.
Because it's not just by sitting silently and just going we're just gonna pray this away, guys. That's that's the mirage. That's exactly the mirage that we're looking at there.
Yeah.
Right.
Which goes to all colonized people. Like Mao said, political power grows out of the barrel of a gun.
Right. Exactly.
Like, you have to have power. You have to have actual power.
Right. That's the only way you can, create any sort of successful change. Like, that's just how it is.
Yep.
Otherwise,
that
the
was
U.S.
the-
would
that
not
was
have
the
moved
difference.
on these policies. Like, they wouldn't have.
Yeah, and why is it that Christianity is so popular among the Black American community, and even in the Indigenous American community? It's tragic. In the past, even 30 years, 20 years, we've seen a huge resurgence of Indigenous religion and Indigenous practices, which is it's amazing. Like, my heart swells when I listen to Nick Estes and Indigenous comrades talking about how their cultures have been revitalized. I'm that is what we need. What is going to destroy America? The core of it is in the Indigenous community, but they are heavily Catholicized and Christianized. And why is that the case? It was an erasure. That is a part of genocide. It's not just the literal slaughter of people. It's the boarding schools. It's the taking away of the kids of their parents. I was just listening to another Guerrilla History episode about Haiti earlier today. The average life expectancy of an enslaved person in the Caribbean in from the 1850s to the 1900s, that era, 5 to 7 years. They weren't even having them have kids. They were just replacing them. That is so fucked up. It's so deeply fucked up. And years later, when they get rid of that, they don't have the active we're literally purchasing and enslaving explicitly directly people from Africa, from the indigenous people we're finding here. That still exists. They're still trying to erase the culture, and the Christianization is a part of that, which is loops back to what I was saying with the white settler colonial Christianity that exists in America, in the USA, and in Canada, and in South America, and Mexico, Brazil, Venezuela, Cuba, all these places in South America. Haiti, which is in that podcast I was listening to, they said an amazing thing where they were Haiti is 80% Christian and 150% voodoo. Because they have, it's a weird fusion incorporation of the indigenous practices rooted back from Africa, mixed with the indigenous American practices, mixed with Catholicism. That's the weird religion they have there. And so who are we to stand over that as the Communist Party and be give all of that up? And at the same time, as we've been saying throughout this conversation, when real socialist change has brought about communism, all that stuff will fade away. That explicit supernatural nonsense. But we can't just run around today talking about a bunch of shit about it and expect the people to just give it up naturally, which is the failure of the new atheism and the Sam Harrises and all those people, and why they ultimately end up going back into and serving reaction and being Islamophobic to loop back in, which is to replace the anti-Semitism, because they genuinely really think that by just getting rid of those practices, society will be made better. And it's a lack of class analysis and the analysis of the production, why things are really actually happening in how things are made, why things are happening in reality. You ignore that and you're just off in fantasy land.
Class analysis is actually the very backbone of how we all live. It's a fundamental trait for everyone. This isn't just something that's reserved for some special select group. No, this is everyone. This is what we have to do. We have to eat, sleep, work. We work. We have to make money. We have places that we live.
From the beginning
Sometimes we
of
might not
life.
have a place to live. Sometimes it might be a little bit difficult to afford a place to live. All of these things are intertwined in what we do every single day. So without the class analysis, you have no idea what the fuck is going on.
Exactly. Not even from the beginning of society. From the beginning of life. Not even mammals, animals, nothing. That's what life is.
Exactly.
Well, Brendan had to jump out. So yeah, what are we thinking? We want to keep going? We want to start wrapping up? I thought this was amazing up to this point, for sure.
I mean, honestly, I'm down to go like another 8 hours, but I doubt anyone else is like that.
Yeah, what's the vibe check here?
Yeah,
I think I'm ready to cut it
I-
short personally.
Yeah, personally, I want to cut it short too, but I would say like I could talk about like the Chuangsa for hours. Like,
For sure. I think it would be good to keep this channel around, maybe even add more people in, just to host other podcasts, talks, even informal offline ones. But yeah, thank you everybody for those amazing contributions. I thought that was a great conversation. Yeah, really good.
yeah, absolutely. I liked everything that everyone had to say. You know, it was all really insightful.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, and like I said in the private chat, I am like a bit of a yapper, which like I said, like a white hetero like cis person presenting, I definitely recognize like the problematic aspects of. But it's like a part of the neurodivergence, like the autism. Like I just go off, and like I heard from Luke about this podcast. Like he was telling me, oh, I'm doing this like podcast about religion, like recording this conversation, whatever. And I was like, oh, you gotta loop me into that because like this is one of my special interests for sure. Like this, like from an anthropological standpoint, as I've like said multiple times, like studying religion is so fascinating.
Oh yeah, I thought you would have some excellent contributions. Yeah, so I guess we don't really need a formal outro. We don't need to do that shit. This ain't nerd shit.
We can play some cool song.
Play Red Sun in the Sky. as
Oh.
the outro.
Yeah. Do any
Oh, that.
do any of you knew? I know you know FD Signifier, Luke, but do any of you else know FD Signifier?
Absolutely, I love his content. I
Yeah.
absolutely love his content.
He's
Oh, yeah.
he's about to come out with a video like covering the Kendrick Drake beef, and I'm like
Oh my
so
God, me and Shiva
hyped for
talked
that.
about this.
I'm
Yeah,
so hyped.
you know how he does it with those long ones. It's like, so this is gonna be one of them long ones. Where it'll be like
That's
a
great.
fucking like hour long, like an hour and 30.
Like
something
he might be like the best YouTube creator there is.
Oh, he definitely is.
And like I
there's
I
I
spend
don't know.
like
Comrade
99%
D. Luke
of my
is pretty
time on
good
YouTube.
too.
Who's that, Luke?
Comrade D. Luke, pretty good.
Yeah.
Makes some good videos.
You know, like when I have bouts of insomnia and I like can't sleep, I'll watch like FD Signifier videos because they're a good way to like spend that time because they're
Hell
just
yeah.
so long.
Yeah, his voice is so amazing too. I'm like that's the other thing. Away from like religion, and like we've been touching on the like settler colonialism and racism, like of America and all that stuff. And like as a white person in America, I have like such a deep appreciation like for Black people and their culture. And like I was just talking to my girlfriend the other day. I'm like, I like love that shit, and yeah, and the indigenous shit too. Like we literally started this whole thing, Luke, like before we even started recording, talking about Orishas, and like Latin American culture and like those people and shit. And I'm like, that is real. Like what is gonna be this place we call America in like 100 years is
Yeah.
gonna be like defined by the indigenous and like the Black people. Which is like when I was listening to that podcast earlier about
that's
height.
always kind of been the thing
Yeah,
too with
It's always
especially with
divided, yeah.
art, especially with for example,
Yeah.
Black art. A lot of music, like Black music, is the most popular music right now. Like hip hop
Yeah,
is the most
it's
popular
mainstream.
genre right now. It's like it's the head of the mainstream right now. And
Yeah.
everyone, it's a cosmopolitan thing. Everyone around the world is on this shit. You know, everyone is.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah.
everyone wants to get a piece of the pie, and that's kind of the name of the game right now. Like that's the head of the capital, and that's what people want. And it's,
Right.
you know,
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
through,
That's
you know,
the
it's
big-
through,
Isn't that
you know,
fucking interesting?
black expression. It's all
It's-
through black expression. It's crazy, and you're also seeing too
it's-
language being appropriated simultaneously. So I'm seeing
Yeah.
like, here's the thing. This weird societal
Or
shift.
Taylor Swift like
Almost.
appropriates my culture.
Yes, exactly. It's
Yeah.
like this weird societal shift, especially in like Gen Zers and such. Like, you know, like these younger kids, like they just have a different sort of language almost, and it's really weird. It's a mix of AAVE and like just nonsense. That's just my humble opinion. Because
Yeah.
you know, it's internet speak. It's glorified internet speak. Because I remember growing up on the internet. You know, everyone used to do all sorts
Yeah.
of, you know, do and say all sorts of weird stuff, like just really outlandish things. You know,
What, you
I've
mean
been
to
on
tell me-
4chan and the such. Like I've seen the worst content
Yeah.
known to man.
Oh yeah.
Okay,
Tumblr-
I've seen the
Tumblr
worst
back in like the
content
late
on
2000s, early 2010s.
Yeah, exactly. Like I get it, but they grew up in an era where the internet is just normal, just
You
absolutely.
mean to
normal
tell me that
at all
you don't vibe with
times.
you don't vibe with terms like skibbity and phantom tax?
I think it's hilarious because here's the thing: I'm here for the memes. All right,
Oh yeah.
I'm here
Yeah.
for the memes.
course.
That doesn't represent me
No.
as a person.
Oh,
You know what I mean?
oh
Like,
my
that's
God.
what I'm saying.
And how deep that goes, that loops into the whole conversation we're having. What is the term meme? Where does that come from? Do any of y'all, like, actual question, does anybody know who came up with the term meme?
Fuck, I know who it was.
DNA of the soul.
Wasn't it? Was it Freud? No.
Richard Dawkins.
Oh yeah, that's right. It was Richard Dawkins.
He
Coined it, right?
conceptualized as the
it's
same
literally
thing
an
as a
element of culture that's just passed on, like, you know,
Yeah.
back and forth,
as
back and forth.
the same thing. Yeah, the same thing that a gene is to genetics, meme is to memetics. That's like where he came up with that term.
Oh, that
Right.
makes sense.
And that, like, it is so profound and genius, but at the same time, that POS is like I said, a self-described Christian atheist, and
Yeah.
an Islamophobe, and an anti-Semite, on top of everything. And it's like, what the fuck? Like,
It just goes to show you how close they get for being, you know, for being so forward in like this really
Insane.
minuscule manner that is also just massive. Like
Yeah.
that's so nuts to me.
like I was saying, they get so close. They're like literally the closest you can possibly get to like the Marxist dialectical materials line, and yet they don't cross it. And it's so
Right.
fucking frustrating.
Reality is truly stranger than fiction.
Yeah, and all these people that get that close to the line I was just describing, what do they fall back onto? The most reactionary, like, fascist shit. Not only is Richard Dawkins like a Christian atheist, whatever, like literal political conservative, he's like a TERF. He's a transphobe. And so, like, literally that for whatever reason, and well, not even for a reason, like, we all know the reason, because class. Like what our comrade just said about how class is literally how things are made, like what real life really actually is. You don't cross that line, and you're susceptible to an endless amount of reaction. And I think it was Forrest earlier who was talking about the Ben Burgess. Was that you, Forrest?
Yeah.
The other person that I got so into, Michael Brooks, introduced me. Like,
Oh yeah.
listening to Michael Brooks is what got me to call myself a socialist. Introduced me to Fela Kuti, Nelson Mandela,
Yeah.
Nasser, like Gaddafi, all these, like, and even introduced me to, like, there are segments of the Michael Brooks show where he, like, straight up says he's, like, not adverse to a Leninist, like, vanguardist model, but at the same time, ultimately a democratic socialist. And his death fucked me up. But that guy, I was like a social democratic socialist, and that guy got me to like a decolonialist, anti-settler colonialism, like genuinely anti-racist position, where I was like, yeah, America is fucked, and like he got me to that position. But at the same time, that was the position I stayed in the longest. Like all this other stuff, I transformed it, which I feel like has real crossover and like explanatory power for like the white experience in America generally. Is like you can get super radicalized to where you're like against even America as a concept. Like I said, my freshman year of high school, I straight up told my friends I didn't believe in evolution. My senior year of high school, the last couple months, I didn't stand for the pledge. They did the pledge every morning, and I like sat down for that shit. I wrote an essay in my AP Lang class that was for the veterans. It was like a not the profile, but it was like for Veterans Day. And the whole thrust of the essay that I wrote was about how I'm like, God damn, you guys went to Vietnam, you went to Korea, you went to Iraq, you must deal with a bunch of guilt, right? And my teacher brought me in and was like, this is a great essay, but I can't give this to the veterans. And I had like a 2-hour long conversation with my parents about how I was like, yeah, I'm against America, and I'm against the wars that like it has embarked on. And like Michael Brooks, like I said, was a huge part of bringing me there. And it's a huge contradictory thing because it's like his death was a big part. Like it psychologically was a big thing for me. I was like I called every person I knew the day that I woke up and I heard that Michael Brooks died. I called my friend. I called Luke. I called our younger brother. I called my parents. I called all my friends, my best friend included. And I was like, I fucking love you guys. Because he was like 30 years old. Like, he might have even been 29. I'm like approaching the age that he was. And he just had a random heart attack in the middle of the night, a heart clot, and died. And I'm like, man, we are mortal. Which goes back to like why religion has a place at all in society and the exploitative nature of it. What happens after we die? Like, where do we come from? What does it mean to be human? These deep questions that don't have like an obvious answer. That's what like organized religion, and the literal worst example of it in all of human history is like American white Christian, that like structure. And that gives like the worst answer to that question. But that's like a deep question that every human has to like face. And that brought Michael Brooks' death like brought that to the fore. I was like calling everybody. Like I said, I was like, I love you guys. Like I could wake up tomorrow and be dead. I could step out on the road and think I'm totally fine. Like the crosswalk is white and a bus hits me and I'm fucking dead. Like you never know.
Yeah,
and that hit me to my core. But at the same time, his death like enabled me to go further on the path of radicalization. Like I was caught in that like DemSoc area for like 2 years. Like the secular talks, the Michael Brooks, the David Pakmans, like that like void. I was stuck in there for like a year or two before I like finally broke out of it. And I have such contradictory feelings about him specifically, Michael Brooks, because he like brought me the furthest along there. To like loop back into what I was saying, until you like really cross that line where you really internalize to like understand the Marxist analysis of like class and what class really is and class dynamics that have existed in human society for the past like 10,000 years. When you really internalize that, that like unlocks so much for you on like a personal, like psychological level. And like I've said in this conversation, if I could snap my fingers and capitalism was gone, glass society was gone, if I could snap my fingers and religion was gone, if I could snap my fingers and everybody understood that, it would be like a non-alienated world for me. Which loops back, like that was the other thing I was going to say about what Brendan was saying. It's like microaggressions. When I go out and I see the cross, and I see like people praying, like religion being so prevalent in society, that like psychologically takes a toll on me. I have to like fight against that. And on a deeper level, the American nationalism. Every time I see an American flag, every time I see people standing and putting their hand on their chest for the Pledge of Allegiance, for the like when I went to mine and Luke's younger brother's graduation, they like sang the fucking national anthem. And like I'm so different to all these other motherfuckers that are just like standing for that shit. Like I would just sat through the whole thing. And I'm like, so like that is what communism means in America, is a rejection of all that shit. Like when there's a case, when it is the real reality that everybody in America like doesn't stand for the pledge, for the national anthem or the pledge or anything, and is like, no, fuck that American identity. That's when we like achieve real transformation. And like you were saying, Luke, where it's like optimism of the heart, pessimism of the brain. Like my heart is like that will happen, but my brain is like, God damn, this country is fucked, bro.
Yeah, like personally for me, like my first like real like political development was in like fourth or fifth grade when like you know, like obviously like being in America, like every day like before class they'd have you like stand for the pledge, right? And what was really interesting is that despite the very reactionary character of my rural school in particular, like they always made sure to say like, oh, you know, like you have the choice to not stand for the pledge if you want to.
Yeah.
And like I remember in like fourth or fifth grade, I like decided to like stop standing for the Pledge of Allegiance because like I was just like, well, I don't know if like I'm like how can I like rationally like deal like positively associate with like being an American when like America like genocided the natives and like had slavery and also like you know
guys.
if if I
Thank you, Caitlin.
if
You're welcome.
I had been born in like any other country on earth, like would I still be expected to think that America is like the greatest country in the world and all that? And like,
Yeah,
you know,
exactly. I'm like, you only
so
think that because you were born here and you were raised in that.
yeah, no, and so like for those reasons, I stopped like standing for the pledge in like fourth or fifth grade, and then like just
But
basically
damn.
like kept doing that through like high school and stuff. And what was really interesting is like despite like the very like reactionary character of like my small, you know, like 98% white rural school district was like even then like when people would like see me like not standing for the pledge, like they would like come up to me like after class and be like, hey, I saw you like weren't standing, like why, like you know why, you know, like what's your reason and stuff like that. Like it was a very
Yeah.
like considerate, not like, you know, antagonistic conversation and stuff like that. So I just thought that was interesting. But
Yeah, no, same experience. And you talking about having like a rural white upbringing in our high school, in mine and Luke's high school, our town of Grand Ledge is a pretty small town. It's like I wouldn't even say 90% white. It's like 99% white. But the school district expands into like like southwestern Lansing, all the way to like the true boondocks of like Mulligan and Eagle and shit. But people have no idea what I'm talking about unless you're from Grand Ledge. And there were the collection of black people that were from Waverly and Southwest Lansing in our high school. They were called Little Africa. I'm not even fucking joking. White kids in the school would call them that. Like that's the background me and Luke come from, and I would love Shiva's input on that. Like, what the fuck? That is so disturbing.
1 second.
Mal really wants to play with him right now.
But like, you remember that shit, Luke? Like, you can attest to that.
Yeah.
Like, that's how it was at Grand Ledge. It was fucked up.
Oh, it was really bad.
I will
All
say
the
that
racists
too.
hung out in a They all hung out in like this one section of the parking lot with their trucks,
Yeah,
and,
the truck
like,
lot.
fly flags and shit.
I heard kids in school, white kids, say the N word with the hard R,
Mm.
like in a disparaging way.
Mm.
I'm like, holy fuck! Like I feel so lucky and like blessed in that like religious
Right.
spiritual sense. I'm like that I didn't like fall prey for that, which is like why our upbringing is super interesting, Luke, with our parents. And
Yeah.
like when I started off the whole conversation about them not being like fundamentalists in that way, like they were, but like not in the same manner. It's very strange. Our parents are very fucking weird.
Oh yeah.
Alright, my bad. I had to let Kaylin out. Alright, repeat what we
Oh,
were
okay.
saying. Refresh what we were on.
Oh, we were talking about our personal experience like in high school, and how like the makeup of our town and like our school district was just really odd, where the town itself was like a very like small town white kind of culture, but the school district like extended into certain parts of like South Lansing and encapsulated like those sorts of groups, and the racism was so palpable in our school that the small amount of like black people in that school were called Little Africa, like that was their moniker, and there were like open racists who hung out with each other. It's just like a really fucking crazy situation that we came out of.
So, like my school experience, sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad, and then other times, because I'm light skinned, neither black people nor white people like me.
Damn. Where'd you
And
grow up?
then-
You grew up
Like,
in the South, right?
the light skin experience is so
I'm from
interesting.
East Side Detroit.
Oh, right.
No, I just used to live in the South for a little bit because my parents forcibly dragged me down there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, to this day, where do most black people in America live? In the South. To this very day.
I mean, I'd wholly rather than not. I mean, who am I kidding? I wish that everything around them would, not be racist and not be.
Yeah, exactly.
Like,
Yeah,
I
but,
don't-
like,
I don't know why you would drag
the
me to
whole-
Florida of all places.
Yeah, the whole migration up north. Like I've talked with Luke about this a million times, and our other brother Thomas about this a million times, and even our family. I'm like, I don't fucking get it. Like what Luke was saying with our upbringing and like the school we went into with like open white racists. There was people who would fly the Confederate flag on their truck like high schoolers. That's actually in high school. I had a job at the local A&W, and the general manager there was expelled from high school for flying the Confederate flag. And the school was like, stop flying the Confederate flag in the school grounds. And he refused and became such an issue that he was expelled because of it. And that was my general manager at the A&W. And I'm like, I don't get that shit. I'm like, one of the things I'm actually proud of as like a white Michigander is there was never a single slave in this like territory. Like, for all the fucked up settler colonialism and white supremacy that has gone down in Michigan, there was never a single, like, plantation that existed in Michigan. And I'm like, to go around flying the Confederate flag, what the fuck is wrong with you? Like,
Yeah.
what is wrong with you?
In my small town, there's probably more Confederate flags than there are American flags.
Oh.
And
I'm
literally
like, you realize those people had a civil war, they shot each other to death. And you're
Yeah.
taking the side of, like, the loser fucking racists.
yeah, well, and like also too, like after I changed high schools, there was like a new principal. He was like the former biology teacher, which, relating back to the religion aspect of the discussion, he was actually like a biology teacher who like didn't believe in evolution because he was like a right wing Christian guy.
Oh my god. Teach the
Um,
controversy type shit.
Uh, and but anyway, he became the principal, and when he became the principal, he basically banned teaching slavery in the high school because it quote unquote would like hurt the mental health of the white student body. Um,
Fuck the mental health of the white student body. Fuck
Yeah,
that.
I will say though, despite the very like reactionary character of my small town, there was like one really cool example of like class solidarity that I saw, which was like in my like when I was in the ninth grade. There was a drug bust at the school for marijuana. Like some students were like dealing and using marijuana and stuff, and like you know, in my town there's like you know, there's like a lot of agriculture, right? And there's a lot of like illegal immigrants and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And there was one student who was a year older than me who's Hispanic. I'm not sure like where from, but like his family he probably had like family who were like illegal immigrants and stuff. And he was one of the people who was like in possession of marijuana. And you know, obviously like, you know, his family could have been deported for that, right? And one of his classmates basically lied to the police and was like, no, I put that marijuana in his bag, he didn't use it or anything like that. And so he basically took the fall for that guy, so that his family wouldn't get deported. And it was just like really cool. You know, I'll always have like
Literally?
infinite respect for that guy.
Literally exact opposite situation happened in Grand Ledge. When I was a senior, a kid that I was in elementary school with, Devin Guilford, respects to that dude.
Oh yeah.
I went to elementary school with him from kindergarten. My senior year, the summer between my like junior year and senior year, got in an altercation with the cops, was shot dead. White kid. Shot dead by the police. Of
That
like
was a
Eaton
radicalizing
County.
thing for me back in high school.
Yeah, no,
Because I was like, what
literally.
the fuck is this?
I was like, fuck the cops. And I've
Yeah.
spoken on this multiple times, like with you, Luke, and with my other friends and stuff. I could have taken that and been like, see, the cops aren't racist, like they killed a white kid too. But the analysis I took from that is the cops are fucked up. They'll kill you no matter what. Black, white, no matter what. And they are racist. But on top of that, they're fucked up in general. They'll just kill anybody. And I'm like, I knew that, because I knew that kid. Some of my earliest memories are with that guy. He was literally in my class in kindergarten. And he like got pulled over by the cops in like a routine pullover. They were like, "Oh, you don't have registration." Started a little like wrestling match with the cop. Got shot and dead. Died because of that. And I'm like, yeah, the cops are fucking racist. But they'll also just kill white people. It's not exclusive to black people. Like, the cops are super fucked up. And the overwhelming majority of what they do is against the minorities of this country. But they'll also just fuck up white people. And like you said, look, that was a legitimately radicalizing moment. I'm like, God damn. The cops are fucked.
Damn. That's a really fucked part to end on, but it's 10 o'clock. I think we gotta call this.
Yeah, it's been good.
No,
It's been very
that's
good.
a perfect place to end on. And to loop it back in, that the cop that literally killed Devin Guilford was put on like paid administrative leave and had a whole political campaign to like reinstate himself. And a huge part of that campaign was like, I'm a Christian, I'm a good upstanding citizen, and I just made like one mistake.
Right. Like moral appeals.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. Alright, well, that was really good. I'm really tired. But yeah.
Yeah,
that was
like I
great.
don't even know how much of the last like hour you want to include, because there's like a point where we were like, okay,
We'll figure it out.
the like outro, and then we like kept talking.
We'll figure it out in editing.
This is gonna be a two-parter. The second half is what you get
think?
when you subscribe to the Patreon.
Yeah.
Yes.
Give us money.
In the
Give us
Patreon, you'll
money.
get our real opinions. All right. Well, thank y'all. I'm gonna disconnect here
Yeah, that was awesome. We need to do this more.
for sure.
Thank you, everyone.